We're going to call Daf Mesech Kesuvos Daf Yud. Begin on the top line of the Yomik, where the Gemara continues explaining the halacha of Shmuel, which we opened up Daf Tes, the well-known Talmudic sugya Pesach Besuch Matzasi, which we spoke about. There's two reasons that we opened up this Masechta, this parak Besul, and this is the Mervi. They get married on a Wednesday because they want to wake up the next morning, go to court, say, hey, she's not a Besula. So we said there's one type of Tainas Dam, it's called, where he claims there was no Dam, there should be the Hamil blood. And then there's another one of Pesach Besuach, where he says it was open, it's supposed to be closed. That's what a Besula is. And there was Rabbi Lazar who said that regarding Lo Yisrael love, which is to make her forbidden on him because she obviously was Mazana, and we had a whole discussion regarding suffix, and then there was Shmuel who says it's actually them on the Hafsidik Subasa. He could say, hey, you don't get the Ksuba of a Besula because you were not a Besula. That's what the Gemara continues explaining the rationale of Shmuel's halacha. How could we believe him to make her lose the Ksuba based on his saying Pesach Besula? Shares corresponds because if Necheskel turned to Daf Yomi is joining today's daf. Some of the things discussed in today's daf are, like we said, the reasoning for Shmuel that Pesach Besuch Matzasi is never Lafsidik Subasa. That why is believed to make her lose a Ksuba? What's that nemanis? We have machlekes regarding Ksubas Isham and Atayra or Ksubas Isham Rabban. Is the Ksuba, which actually tries to discuss it. The words itself we say is midday, so we seem to pass to like the opinion of Shmuel who says it's biblical. Some say it's rabbinic. However, all agree that Ksubas Almana is Rabban. Ksuba for a widow is rabbinic. So we begin the current daf. Daf Yud, top line of the Gemara. Itmar we learned. Amar Nachman, Amar Shmuel, Mishum Shimon ben Elazar. In other words, what the Gemara is trying to tell us is, if Ksuba was Kairais, if the dowry, if that document that you give to the woman, that when she's going to be widowed or divorced, she's going to get a certain amount of money, is biblical, then of course we wouldn't believe him to remove from her monetary rights, only with a definitive testimony. But since her Kesuvos is Chachamim, Tiknu Lem Lebenais Yisrael, it was a rabbinic institution for the Jewish women. That Lebsulam assigned that a virgin gets 200 zuz. Ulamana and a widow gets 100. Oh, so it's rabbinic. So Vehem Heminuhu. So they could now believe the husband, Shem Amar Pesach Besuch Matzasi, that if he says that I found the opening was open, Nemon, he's believed. Because like Rashi says, what's called Him Amr Behem Amru. They said and they said. They were the ones who instituted the ksuba, and they said that he's believed to make her lose the ksuba, even with a claim of just saying, I found it open, and therefore that's why he's believed. But the Gemara wonders, in Cain, if that's the case, that he has the ability to revoke her rights of ksuba, what did the sages gain that they instituted ksuba in the first place? The whole point of the ksuba was that that it shouldn't be an easy thing just to get rid of her. If he could just say Pesach Besuch Matzasi, what did they gain with the whole rabbinic institution? So Amar Rava says that there's no reason to be concerned that a person would make such a claim, only if it was truthful. Because if he really hated her from the beginning, so Chazaka, we have a presumption that Einodin Tereach Beseuda, a person would not go ahead and go through the whole effort of making this whole wedding Suda, Umafsida, and to cause a loss. He wouldn't go ahead and go through the tircha and marry her and then for nothing spend that 100K and throw it out. He would have divorced her from beforehand. Obviously, that he must be telling us the truth, and therefore, that's why we believe the husband, if he says Pesach Besuch Matzasi, he must be telling the truth, and therefore that chazaka is actually what we rely on for his nemanis. So although she has a ksuba to collect, but there's a chazaka that's telling us that he's telling us the truth, and based on the laws of chazaka, he's going to believe to make her lose a ksuba.
She didn't tell the truth.
If she didn't tell the truth.
If she didn't tell the truth, that there was something wrong with her.
Right, so Taisa discuss exactly what is she claiming throughout these sugyas. What is she saying? Is she saying that when did it, Taisa actually asked her the question, she could believe with a mikud that I was Mishastani and Nasti. Yes, but Al-Kabam, his chazaka of his claim is belief. Now, related to, we learned the Braisa, which relates to this idea about the rabbinic ksuba. Since ultimately the actual ksuba is rabbinic, like we were just mentioning, that's the principle that we believe him because the rabbis could choose because they're the ones who instituted in the first place. So they So therefore the ksuba is only collected where, let's say the husband dies, she's coming to collect from the estate, her ksuba, and he has three categories of land. There's what's called idis, top quality, the ziburs, the lowest grade, and there's bein, this medium grade. So she cannot say, "Oh, give me the best," or "Give me from the middle grade" in the value of the ksuba. Rather, if she's coming to collect, you give her the lowest grade, because it is a rabbinic penalty. So therefore, it's not like a biblical right that you have, which you get, like we found by Nezikin, you get idis. No, it's rabbinic, so you're going to get from the lowest grade. The Gemara wonders on the wording of the brisa. Knasa? It's a penalty? My knasa. What's the penalty? In other words, what did he do wrong? What did anyone negligent that you're going to penalize? And Elaim says, Gemara, no, the words are since the rabbinic institution, they take these words only going to collect from the lowest grade. Again, that's in contrast to biblical law, which you find that there's edus that you collect from. Now, the brisa continues, however, he says, Ksubas isha min hatayr. He says, no, it's not a takans chacham. He says the ksuba is biblical, as the Gemara is going to learn later on from Kesuvos Yishkol Kamar Habasulas. There's a biblical law. So we have a machlekes tanoim over here, if the ksuba is deraisa or draban. So Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg was just quoted as saying that's biblical. On that as the Gemara, did he really say that the ksuba is biblical? But by the time you have another brisa. The brisa quotes the pasuk in Shemais, which is by the mafata. If a man seduces a girl, the halacha is he has to compensate. Kesuvos Yishkol, he has to weigh out the silver coins, k'mayar habasulas, like the mayar, settlement of the virgins. So what do you mean k'mayar? It sounds like you're comparing the shkolim that you're giving for the mafata to something else. K'mayar habasulas, which is says the brayso that here by the mafata it should be k'mayar habasulas. What does that mean? K'mayar habasulas. So Rashi tells us in Devarim Chavbeis it talks about if a man rapes a girl. And there, the pasuk penalizes him 50 silver coins because of the moyer of her pesulim, because of the settlement of her virginity which he violated, and also it's the other way around the comparison. But moyer pesul is kazeh, which the pasuk is comparing the knas of mafata to the knas of oines. Just like over there it's 50 silver coins, so to over here, and just like over here by the mafata, the silver coins have to be shkolim because it says yishkol. Also over there by the oines, by the rapist. It also has to be shkolim, meaning that you shouldn't say that it's a ma'ah. A ma'ah is a sixth of a shekel. So that's what we're comparing the mafata to the oines. Now, continues the Tana Kama. Mekan samcha chachama. From here, the sages found a source, the ksubas isha min hatayr, that the ksuba for a woman should be biblical. Why? Because since the wording is moyar, and it says that by Shem, which is that we see that there's such a concept by when you're taking a woman that you have to give her a certain amount of money. That is the biblical source for a kesuba. That's the Tanakama. But Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, he says, no, it's not biblical, it's el d'Seifrim. So an explicit contradiction in the opinion of Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg. Previous brisa, he's saying that it's biblical, and here he's saying that it's rabbinic. So the Gemara says, okay, Epoch, you have to switch it around. You have to switch around the last brisa and say that the opinions were inverted. That really, Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg is the one who says the brisa. Says the Gemara, so where do you see fit to say that the second brisa should be switched around? Maybe Epoch Kamaisa, maybe switch around the first brisa. Says the Gemara, no. Hashamina Leil, Rabbi we know from a different source, a third source, that according to Rabbi Shloimy that he said the ksuba of a woman is biblical. Where do we know? This is not like in the Mishnah later on of Kof Yurim and Beis. In the last paragraph, there's a Mishnah that says if a man married a woman in Eretz Yisrael, but they moved on in life and they went into Kapet Kaya, a different place, and he divorced her over there. He gives her from the monies of Eretz Yisrael, which are a lesser value. Let's discuss exactly what is it regarding the value, how do we compare the value, but it's a lesser value. Now, let's say he marries a woman in Kapet Kaya, then they make Aliyah and he divorces her in Eretz Yisrael. He gives up the monies of Eretz Yisrael, the amount that's written in the Ketubot, because we always go, says the Tanakama, L'kula. So you're always going to give from the monies of Eretz Yisrael, whether you married over there, you divorced over there, which those monies are, that currency against the value of the Kapet Kaya value is much lower. So that's how the Tanakama says. But, continues the Mishnah, which our Gemara quotes, he says, no, you always are Noislam and Mois Kapet Kaya. You give her for the monies of Kapet Kaya, which is where there was a lien already. When you got married in Kapet Kaya, there was a shibud on those like any other loan, because, as Rashi explains, you see that he holds ksuba is dairaisa, so there's a shibud. If it's rabbinic, okay, so whichever one is the lesser of the two, the rabbi's obligation is not a shibud. But if it's biblical, then there's a shibud, then you have a biblical obligation that starts when you got married to Kapet Kaya, and therefore even if you move to Eretz Yisrael, no, you can't just give the monies of the ksuba of Eretz Yisrael, you would have to give that of Kapet Kaya. So you see, says the Gemara, Rabbi Shloimy is the one who holds Ksubas Isha B'Deraisa. So if we're going to resolve a contradiction of the first two brises, one he says is Deraisa, one says Rabbanan, we would have to say that he's the one who holds Deraisa and switch around the second brisa, as we see from this third source, a Mishnah of Kofiyot, that you see clearly Rabbi Shloimy holds Ksubas Isha is Deraisa. That's one way of resolving the contradiction. If you want, you can say another way is kula, that whole contradictory brisa, the second brisa, was all entirely. What's going on? Someone set my phone here. It keeps on going over that. Subas Isha is that you could say the second brisa is all of Shimon Gamliel and there's words missing, and the way you have to say it is like this, meaning to say that we had read it originally. The second brisa was a Tanakama, and Shimon Gamliel disagreed. Says the Gemara, no, you have to read like this. From the fact that it says Kamaya Basulis is where the Chachamim found the source for Ksubas Isha Minatar, that from biblical law. But, and this is the point that the Gemara is introducing now, in the Brisa, Ksubas Almana ain't with the retire but the Ksuba of a widow, that's not biblical, that's all from rabbinic law, and it's not a new opinion of Shimon Gamliel Omer. It's Sher Rabban Shimon Gamliel Omer, because he says Ksubas almana in the ksuba of a widow is not biblical, it's only rabbinic law. So upon him we resolved Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg that you see that yes, he always held this deraisa. That second brisa, he seems to say clearly it's rabbinic law. No, he's saying on the ksuba of almana, that's what we say that's only going to be rabbinic and not biblical. Now I think where it goes back to the halacha of the previous daf of Pesach Pesuach regarding that we believe him. So it was Rav Nachman, the top of the Amid, it was Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel, which was from the previous daf, which we said that Rav Nachman said in the name of Shmuel, that Pesach Pesuach Mitzasi, he's never lafsidik subas. Now the Gemara actually brings a story that seems to contradict. Hahuda also came to Rav Nachman. There was a certain person given from Rav Nachman. Amalei says Rebbe Nechten is given man chasna, and Pesach Pesuach Mitzasi says I found the opening was open. So the Gemara says, Amalahu Rav Nachman. Nachman said to the people around him, said to the Dayunim, his Azvu, he said that give him malchus, give him lashes, with kufri, with these sharp branches of a palm tree which have projectiles like thorns coming out of it, because Mevarachasa, which meaning the town was Mevarachasa, but he meant like the harlots of this city, which is called Mevarachasa, Chavitale, they're constantly being banged from him for znus, because what does he know about Pesach Pesuach? How's this chus to know? What do you know about Pesach Pesuach? So he says, give him lashes. So the Gemara says, but Rav Nachman Huda Mehaman, he's the one in the name of Shmuel that said that if a chashin comes the next morning, he says Pesach Pesuach Mitzasi, he's Naman. So there's two ways of explaining what the Gemara's Shakamatari is, but the Gemara says, yeah, Mehaman he's believed. Who must be like Kufri. But we give him lashes because we believe you. Because you're not going to go through a whole chasna and lut. But akapanim, how do you know? So obviously that either you're lying, like Tish says in one shot, because how do you know? Or must have been you a mazana with all these women, and that's how you know. Be there as an A, yeah, you believe, but you're going to get lashes. You're going to get shmasin for what you do. That's one shot. Or another way of resolving it, Rav Achim he answers that it actually depends. That kan bebacher, that if he was a bacher, if he was a single man, never married before, so he's not believed, and we're going to give him lashes because he had the audacity to come to the Rav and tell him that Pesach Pesuach Mitzasi. Kan, when do we say that he's believed? Is benosoi. He was previously married. So him we believe, and we don't give him lashes because, yeah, he knows. He's been married before, and he knows what the experience was. And therefore, that's the resolution to, is he believed or is he getting malchus? Is either, yes, you believe and you get malchus, or no. Depends if it's a bacher or if someone that was previously married.
So you disencourage people to come to Besdin?
It depends according to which answer. According to the first answer or the second answer? According to the second answer. Well, it depends. The time is dumb, and the time is dumb is different. The time is dumb is you didn't see the dam, so that has nothing to do with any Pesach Pesuach. That would be the Solinissimi and Meravi. Here we're talking about the claim of Pesach Pesuach. That according to that approach, that how do you know that? Although we'll believe you, but for that we'll give you lashes.
In another place, the Gemara mentions that everyone is mokre in being burned outside.
Hatiyah, right. Right, meaning how do they know? Right, so it's a good shayla. I'm saying al kapanim, even if you are proficient at the art to know that experience of Pesach B'Suach would still be a shtickle different, to know what it's like. We'll actually have on one of the dafim today that idea, which even if you know an idea, but experientially might be something different. You might not know that for sure. Now the Gemara brings another story, similar to what you're bringing up. How the Asl came into Rabbi Gamliel. Someone came in front of Rabbi Gamliel. Amalei said to him, Pesach B'Suach Mitzvah, he says, Rebbe says that I found it open. Amalei says, Shemeh Tisa. Maybe you tilted. So this is interesting. It comes up regarding like what you're saying if they know how to tilt, because there's two versions in the Gemara. It says maybe you tilted, and maybe that's why you found it open. He says, he says, I'll give you a mashal, what you compare this to. A person was walking in the dark and finstered nighttime. It's dark. Now hita. So when he came to the opening of his house, which was locked, and there was something blocking it from opening it, but when you tilt it to the sides, it opens up. So Matzah B'Suach, he found it open. Meaning it was really locked, but he couldn't see, and he just came in, he pulled it from the side, it opened. Loihita, if he wouldn't tilt it, no, he would find it locked. So basically saying that Mashal the same thing. Maybe you tilted and you found your way open, but that doesn't mean to say that it's not locked and that the B'Sulim were not there. Or you can tell me those that say that actually no, if you're not intending, it's not common that you're going to tilt. And we don't say that maybe he tilted. Rather, no, what he was asking him was, he says, he was telling him, maybe you deliberately tilted. And you uprooted the door, and the bar. Which says, I could give you a mashal that this could be compared to, is the person who's going in a dark night, hita b'mezid, and if he deliberately, with force, goes and he tilts, so matzah b'suach, he finds it open. Like hita b'mezid, but if he doesn't deliberately tilt it, matzah no, finds it closed. So essentially, yes, you could say pesach b'suach, and you're not lying, and we'll believe you. But maybe you deliberately did in a way to find it open, and because at the nighttime, if you deliberately push on a certain way, it's going to come open. But really, it could be that it was closed, and therefore he was telling him that he was basically checking him out to see how true is his claim regarding Pesach B'Suach, to believe him or not. Now going back to the beginning of the Masechta, regarding Tainas Damim, regarding the claim of Besul Nislim Revi, which we said is if, let's say, you find on the sheets there's no dam, and this is problematic because there should be dam and Besulim. So the Gemara brings the story, who the Asl coming to Rabbi Gamliel? But Rebbe. There was someone that came in front of Rabbi Gamliel, the son of Rebbe. Amalei, he said to him, Rebbe, Ba'al Tiva Mitzasi Dam. He says, I had beer last night, the first one. I didn't find any blood. Amalei, so that the woman said to Rebbe, Besula, you see, my teacher, I was a Besula. I was a virgin. So he said to them, bring me the cloth. So they brought him the cloth. They soaked it in water and they washed it. They found in it many droplets of blood, because the droplets of blood were covered with the semen. So although you didn't see any dam, that's because it was covered over with other types of secretions, and when they washed it, then you found that it was stained with the blood. Amalai, he said to the chassan, go ahead and merit in your acquisition. She was a basula. Now, Amalai Huna Mar Bered the Rava Mepazaki Ravashi. So Huna Mar, the son of Rava from Pazaki, said to Ravashi, he says, oh, wow, azah patent, what Rebbe did, we're going to do the same thing. When the chassan comes to us with the cloth that seems to not have any blood, we're going to use the same test to verify if there's dam there or not. So Malay, on that, Ravashi said to him as he continued to the days, no, it's not going to work. Why not? Because Gihud Shalanu, our pressing, that in Bavel, which is done with a glass stone, is Kekibush Shalahem, is the equivalent of their laundering in Eretz Yisrael, where that story took place in Wil Rebbe. Meaning, in their days, this was many years before, they did very good laundering, either because they had very good detergents, or the water, whichever one it is. But our laundering, he was telling him, the garments don't get as white and pressed until you actually press it. So it's not going to work to just launder, because our laundering is not so good to get rid of all the secretions to get the blood under them. And V'yam never gives, and he said, okay, let's do the pressing, which will be the equivalent of what their laundering was. That's a problem, because Mavakle Chomarta, because then the rubbing of the stone is going to remove the blood, and it's going to defeat the purpose too also. So you're not going to end up, you can't utilize this method to try to figure out if there really is blood underneath or not. Another story Again, another chassan came in front of Gamliel Berebbe. It sounds like it was something that happened that the chassanim would come and use this halacha. So he said to Rebbe, my teacher, and again today, like Taisa brought, that's what I mentioned, with a boigris, anyways, if there's no more dam anymore, that when the girl is older, so they say the dam is already used up already, so not necessarily would that even be applicable, but in Talmudic times, so he comes, he says, says I did be, and I didn't find blood. So Amalei, she said to him, to Rebbe, my teacher, I'm still a Besula. So Amalei, meaning to say, like even if he thinks he did bia, there was a chassan already. He didn't even consummate the relationship. So he said, I'm still a basula. So Rebbe said to the gaboim, he said, bring me 2 maidservants. Achas basula v'achas bula. Bring me one that is a virgin, bring me one that's not. So they brought him these 2 women. And he put them on top of a barrel of wine. The woman who had bia once before, you were able to smell from her mouth the aroma of the wine, which was coming through the lower opening, through the upper opening. So it's going through her body, and you're able to smell the wine. But Basula ain't rechanayder. The virgin, you didn't smell anything through, because it was closed on the bottom. So you weren't smelling anything through her mouth. Oh, so Abzu Hishibas, he took this woman, she put her on the barrel of wine, and there was no aroma of wine coming through. So Malay said to the chassan, go ahead and acquire your acquisition, because she's still a basula. You didn't even have, you didn't find any dam because you didn't do anything, she's still a basula. So the Gemara wonders, why do you do this? Why do you bring the 2 shvaches, the basula and bula, v'nibdik meikar b'gavah? Why didn't you just check with the kala herself, put her on the barrel of wine, and see if we're or not? So the Gemara tells us, this is what we mentioned in passing before, Gemara Habashmile. Rebbe had a tradition that, as the Gemara says in Yomim Samach Beis, that the daughters of Yavish Gilad, they did this thing when they wanted to see, they had to kill out the women that they were taking captive, those that were Ba'ulais, but not the Basulais. So he had heard there was such a Gemara that they had done that. But Maisel Abachazi, he never saw in practice anyone ever do such a thing. So he wasn't sure how this works. For some he thought, maybe he's not going to know how to do this method very well. It's not appropriate to be disgraceful for the Jewish women. Like he said, that this was not tested on animals. We don't want to test this on the Jewish woman. We don't know what's going to happen. So he first tried it out. He heard such a Gemara. He says, but then he took these 2 shvachas. Then you could try it out on. And then when he realized it works, then he took this woman and he saw that there was no aroma coming out. Therefore he says, obviously she's a basula. Another story. Who does come into Gamliel Hazakan? Now it's not Gamliel Berebbe. There's more than one Gamliel. There was Gamliel the elder. And Amalei, he said to him, Rebbe, says, Rebbe, I did be and I didn't find blood. So we're finding many stories that the Gemara is bringing that they didn't find dam, but there's exceptions to the rule, as we see that the great tzaddikim, they're able to find out different rationales. Amrulay, so she said to him, Rebbe, I'm from the family of Durkati, she'ein lahen, that they don't have loydam nida, they don't have the menstrual blood, they don't have the hymenal blood. So therefore, of course, although I was a basula, but of course there's no dam, because we don't have that dam. So Gamliel checked out by her relatives, and he found that that's true, that she's from that family. So Malay said to the chassan, go ahead and merit in your acquisition. How fortunate you are that you married to marry into the mishpach of Durkati. Says the Gemara, my Durkati. Where did they get that name of Durkati? It's actually a compound word of dur katua, of a cut-off generation, meaning that because they don't have not the menstrual blood and not the hymenal blood. As Gemara is going to explain, that's actually der katua, that they actually get cut off, meaning because they don't actually have children because of the fact that they don't have that. Because Amr Reb Chanina, he says, Tanchumin shel hevel, it was a consolation of vanity, of emptiness, that Nichmer Gamliel consoled that person by saying, how fortunate you are that your wife doesn't ever have a period, doesn't have to have any of these problems.
With if she was born.
What?
How could she be a dog couture? She was born.
Right. Meaning they're able to have.
They have kids.
They're able to have, but it gets cut off because they don't have that many. because the turn of Bechia taught in the Brisa, Kshem Shas or Yafalisa, just like you don't have too much yeast, but just like even though yeast is something that is chaotic, but it's good for the dough a little bit. Kachdam Yafalisha, so too the bloods are good for a woman because it actually helps her get pregnant. And the Tanam Shem Rameh, we're talking about in Rameh, Kalisha should Reuben, any woman that has a large quantity of the bloods, Reuben has a large amount of children, because we know that for conception that it requires the menstrual cycle. A woman who doesn't have a menstrual cycle, it's very hard, oftentimes for a woman to conceive, to have children. So actually, Idma, we learned that Rabbi Yomi Ba'Abba, he says, so the words that it Zacha b'mekchacha amalei. And Rabbi Mullah Zaken told him, go married in the acquisition. But Rabbi Yisrael Ba'Abba, he says, Nischai b'mekchacha amalei. He said that by default, you have to carry this load of the acquisition, like the word of in chaven la'adam. It's something that is not good for a person. It's called a chayv. He says, Nischai b'mekchacha. Okay, this is the woman you got. This is what you have to take. So the Gemara wonders, Bishlam al-Madam Nischai. We understand according to one that says that, okay, this is what you're stuck with. Because that's what Chanina said, because it's bad that she doesn't have dam nida. Although it's great, she never has to go to the mikvah, she has never have a problem. But the problem is, you're not having any children, or very few. So therefore it's nischayif. But el-madam azach, but according to one that says that, he said, told him, so what's the merit, what's the glick, what's good about not having the dam? So the Gemara also they suffik nida. It doesn't come to the situation of doubt to love a nida, where a woman has dam, you might come to the situation of suffik nida. That's why you don't have that problem, because your wife is barely going to have any menstrual blood. So therefore, that's why it's a zacha. Another story, Hahid also came into Rebbe. There was a man that came from the Rebbe. Amalei, the chassan said to him, Rebbe, ba'al tevim mitzvah dam. He says, I did be, and I didn't find blood. So Amalei, so the Kala said to the Rav that to Rebbe, says, Rebbe, I died basula, you see. I'm still a basula. Now, the Gemara tells us the background to the story that B'shnei B'tzayis Haba. It was a year of a famine. And Rebbe saw a Shepidei Mishchayim. This is why it takes a smart person to be a leader of people, where you can't just say, oh, he says, Ein Lo Dam, so she's going to be Aser. No, you see every Rebbe, one after another, was thinking about different reasons why it's a possibility that there's no Dam. So he saw that their faces are black because of the hunger of famine. So he commanded regarding them, he put them into the bathhouse, gave him to eat, gave him to drink, and he put them in the room. They had bia, and they found dam. Meaning obviously he had no kayach, she didn't have any kayach, so therefore they probably didn't even have a robust intimacy. So Amalei, now after this whole thing that he fed them and he drank, gave him to drink, and so then he said they found dam. Amalei zach leich zachem b'mikchacha. Go ahead and married in the acquisition. And Kardeb Alim Rebbe recited regarding them the pasuk in Eicha. Safad oidim alatzma, which Rashi says either means that their skin was stuck to their bones, or it was black on their bones. Yavash ha'ikeitz was dry like a bone, and therefore, in such a state that of course they're not going to be able to have the vitality of the bia and having the dam, and therefore afterwards, when they gave him kayach, then they found the dam, and therefore he says leich azacha b'mekchach. Now continuing the halacha, the next Mishnah. Now, regarding we opened up talking about Kesuvos, but in a backwards way, about Basula Nissis, and oftentimes it's actual on purpose, as elsewhere Tessi explains, that's how we start off. But Al-Kapan, now we're going back to the root of this halacha of what is the Kesuvos. It says the Mishnah of Basula, so we said the Basula gets married on the Yom Revi, so that it relates to A, her Kesuvos, and B, regarding her being Aser. So it says the Gemara, the Mishnah of Basula, Kesuvos Masayim. A Basula, her Kesuvos, her dowry is 200 zuz, and a widow gets 100. Now, moreover, what's regarding certain cases, it says the Mishnah Basula, let's say, whether she's a Basula that's an Almana, that was widowed, she was married, but she's still a Basula, or a Grush, or she's divorced, or a Chalutza, or she had Chalitza. Mina Erisin, but it was that she was widowed or divorced or had Chalitza from someone that she was engaged to, not married to, engaged to. And then she went and married someone else. So Ksubasa, her Ksuba from the second husband is going to be Messiah. It's going to be 200 zuz because she has a chazaka that she's still Basula when he's getting married to her. Of course, she was never married. And Kalas are not intimate with their chasanim when they're engaged. So therefore she still has the chazakis Basula to get the Ksuba of 200. And therefore V'yeshlan times Basulim. If let's say the second husband, the morning after, says, hey, she wasn't a Basula, so she loses her whole Ksuba because obviously it's a Mekach Tais, he could claim, where was the Basulim? Aisha was married once before. No, she was engaged once before. Engagement, there's no reason why I should have thought that you were not a Basula. And therefore, it would be considered as a Mekach Tois for her to lose her entire Kesubah. Right. So for Yehuda, exactly. So then that would be a different discussion. So the Gemara says, "My almana." The Gemara has an interesting limud. Is where do we come the word almana from? Because the word almana is really the aleph lam and mem. It's really from the word of ilan, like someone who's mute, which that's what almana is. She's a lion vashtaim. But what's the word almana? Where does the nun hey come from? So that's actually the mem nun hey. Amar Rav Chana Bagdasa from this place called Baghdad. He says almana is al shem mana, is because if she gets married after she was widowed, her ksuba is only going to be a mana, so therefore she's called an almana. So the Gemara says, wait a second, but almana min erisin, which in one of the cases mentioned in the Mishnah, you told me that if she's widowed from being engaged, where her ksuba is 200, like a regular basula, so my remember, what are you going to say? That's not almana because of mana. So the Gemara says, Aidi deha, because of the almana from nisuin. Korel almana, you call her almana. So Hanami Korel almana. So therefore, we kept the same terminology, the same label from a woman that was widowed from engagement, even though over there she's not going to get just almana, she'll get amasai. The Gemara says, wait a second, almana is b'daraisa. But what's with the almana that's written in the Torah? And the ksuba is a rabbinic, it was never instituted yet. Mike, remember, what are you going to say? Why is the Torah calling it almana? It's written in the Torah. Almana grusha leikacha, that a kohen cannot marry almana. How is the Torah calling almana if it's a rabbinic institution and almana? Everyone agrees ksubas almana is the rabbana. So the Gemara says, yeah, that's the rabban the misak almana, because the rabbis are ultimately going to institute that almana is going to get almana. So therefore, the Torah is already calling it almana. So the Gemara, mikas akra, there's a pasuk write something's name la'asid for the future of what's going to happen later on in time. So the Gemara says, yes. Just like it says in the pasuk, M'shem anar hashlichi chidekel. The name of the third river was Chidekel, and it talks about the four rivers that emanated from Gan Eden. That's what goes to the east of Ashur. But the Tana B'Yisrael, the east of Brisa, Ashur zu Sleika, which is the name of a city. Which Taisa discusses why we need to bring in the Targum for what's the ultimate proof. But Al Kapam, they knew that this was not around at the time of the Torah, and therefore you see, obviously, as the Gemara says, Mihavia, was that city built at the creation of the world that went around the east of Ashur? No, El Dasida, rather it's something of the future. So Chanami here also regarding the Ksuba, we're calling on Almana in the Torah because Dasida based on the future. The rabbis ultimately one day are going to make an Almana, giving Ksuba of Almana, so therefore the Torah already calls her as Almana. Now once we brought in Reb Chana Bagdasa with a Nagadic teaching, so the Gemara brings in a few different Vamar Reb Chana Bagdasa. He says Matar. Now here it's not like what we said before that we were expounding the word of Almana, which is Mana. No, nothing to do with the letters over here. It's just his logic that he's saying that rain, it does a bunch of things. Rain is mashka, it waters, marvet, it saturates the ground, umazal, it fertilizes the ground, uma'adnos, it gives a shine to the peiris, umamshach, and it also draws. Now, Amar Rava, Barebi, Yishmol, V'yitem, something Rabbi Yemer, Bashalem, he says, Micro, what's the passage that illustrates this idea? It's a passage in Tillim. Tilameha, the ridges, the ends of Eretz Yisrael, Rave saturate, Nachas kidudeha settle her furrows, Brevivim to make again, and with showers you soften it, and Simcha tevarech, her growth you'll bless. Which Rashi explains, you see here in this pasuk all the elements, because Rave saturate refers to mashke and marva, watering and saturating. To make again is mezabel, is fertilizing, and ma'adid and mamshech, where it makes its splendor shine and that it draws the peiros. That's learned out from simcha tevarich, from its sprout, its growth you're going to bless. So you see from that pasuk that rain does all these different things. A similar teaching, meaning the same idea that you're saying a word and you're saying what it does. Amar Belazar says mizbeach, the altar was meziach, which the Gemara originally assumes it means that it removed the sins, because meziach means to remove. Umezin, and it also sustains, because in the merit of the kabbanis, the world is sustained. And because the karbanis come from the food, and therefore causes blessing in the food, we bring wheat, and we bring oil, and we bring wine, and we bring animals. Mechaviv, it also makes the Jewish people dear to their Father in heaven. And mechaber ereton, says the Gemara. Well, and as you see, each one says with mems. It's the matar, mizbech, and each word had a mem with it. Says the Gemara, behind mechaper, behind meziach, To atone means to remove the sins. So the Gemara, no, mezich gezerus. Mezich means to remove the bad decrees from the Jewish people, and the mechap avonos, and it atones for the sins. Going back to another teaching from Amar of Chanbag Desah, another agadic teaching, it says tamri, dates, the same idea that many different things that it does with a mem is meshachnon, it warms up a person. Mazban, it satiates a person. Mishalshalan, it's a diuretic, meaning it helps a person relieve his constipation. Ma'ashron, and it gives strength. But it does not increase a person to become more delicate and as someone that's a finicky person. These are all praises of dates. Now Amar Rav, he says a related teaching. So when he eats dates, al yair, he should not give a halachic ruling because it perturbs a person's intelligence, like when someone's intoxicated. On this halacha, the Gemara asks Meisver. The Gemara says from the following brisa. The brisa says tomorrow dates. Shachris v'arbis. If you eat in the morning and the evening, yofis, they're very good. Which the general rule is, after eating, then dates are good. So in the morning, people usually eat pasha achas, as the Gemara says in Bamatzika of Zayman Beis. And in the evening, we know people always eat supper. So morning or evening, dates are good because it's coming after the meals. But b'mecha in the afternoon, rois, they're bad because it's before you eat. It's after you took your afternoon nap and you eat dates then, that's not good. But b'tzarayim, in noon, meaning after you ate your morning meal and you're satisfied and you're satiated, then inkamaisim. Then there's nothing that compares to it. It's better than eating in them in the evening because since during the daytime, you're not held back from going to the fields because in Talmudic times, they didn't have the bathroom, the lavatory like we have it. They had to go out to the fields. So if you're working in the fields and you ate the dates, and you got to relieve yourself, so that's great. You just, move to the side and you do what you got to do. But at nighttime, it's a tircha because you ate the dates and it makes your stomach stop moving and you had that coffee and you're starting to, everything's turning around. So that wouldn't be as great. But at noontime, there's nothing that compares to it. Moreover, the dates, they nullify three things. Bad thoughts, meaning as Rashi says, worry. Because dates make a person's heart glad. And at noontime, it's a time of light and of freiligkeit and of happiness. It's afternoon, meaning it's at noontime. So therefore, it nullifies a person's worries. It stops his intestinal illness. And it stops hemorrhoids. But one thing is the Gemara is showing is that you see that dates are very, very good. And it's even good for machshavas. So why is Rav saying that if you took dates, that it perturbs the person and he should not give a halachic ruling? So the Gemara says, did we say that dates are not good? Of course they're great. But but in the moment, it perturbs the person. Just like when you drink wine. That the master says, whichever agrees wine is good, but if you drink a quarter of a leg of wine, you shouldn't give halachic ruling. That's the same thing that applies to dates. That's one approach. If you can say another approach. Look, it's not difficult. Rav's teaching that was saying that it's a bad thing that you should not give a halachic ruling is mikmeinam, is before you eat bread. When's the brisa saying that it's good? Is labasanam, is after you eat bread. Because Abai says only my mother told me, which Abai says many times just what his mother told him, which actually not even his mother, it's his nursing mother because his mother died. But my mother told me, Tamri mikmeinam, maybe you eat dates before bread, kinargala dikulam. It's like an axe to a palm tree, which is chopping it down. It's not good. Basanahama, if you have it after the bread, is ki'avula dasha. It's like a bar for the door that it protects and actually maintains the body. Now, once we mention dasha, once we mention door, so the Gemara mentions a drasha on the word itself. Dasha, what does that mean? It says the word door is because derech sham. It means that's the path over there, that's the way in. And darga, a ladder, is Amarav says is the word of derech gag. It's a way to get to the roof. Puria, which is the name of a bed, Amar Papi says is called sheparin v'ravnalam, because that's the place where you are fruitful and you multiply. That's what a puria is. And as we continue on your it says af on the name. Let's also expound words. What's the wording of islandess? Chacham always called a woman that is not able to have a child as an islandess. He says because that's duchronis. The chronis is like a terminology of a ram because a ram is an isle. Islandess is an isle, which is a male ram, where the layalada, where it cannot have a child. That's what they call the woman that can have a child. Now the islandess, because of the word of isle of a zachar of the male species to show like just like the male can't have, it's only the female, so that this woman can have a child. Thank you for any time.